today, I am your host, Fletch, and today I am joined by, at this moment in time, two stunning gentlemen, but hopefully a third one will join us in a little while. If not, that's fine. We have, as you can probably see on your screen right now, Nick, who is just here every week and a staple in this podcast. How are you this evening, Nick? Sorry, my English is just escaping me at the moment.
I'm all right, thank you. Surviving. Same old. Crack on.
And a brand new face on the podcast, but hopefully one that you are all very familiar with already. If not, you really, really should be. We have the fantastic Joe Londergan, managing editor, G5 Football Daily, and college sports writer for Sports Illustrated. Joe, how are you this evening?
I'm great, guys. Thank you so much for asking me to come on and talk to the English fans and I guess the Scottish fans and the Irish fans too. We don't need to talk about the Welsh, but I'm kidding. I'm totally kidding. Love you, Wales.
My poor wife, who is Welsh, sat right next to me, who's just heard that. So that's it for tonight's episode. Thank you for joining in. It was a bit of a quick. Okay, so as we normally do, we'll just get cracking the news straight away. And Nick, I know you've got a couple of pieces for us. If you would like to fire those off for us.
Yeah, a lot of the top quarterbacks for this coming year are currently hanging it out with the Mannings. The Manning Passing Academy, which happens every year, takes in all the top college QBs. So, there's quite a few. There's quite a few there. Quinn Ewers, Jalen Milroe from Alabama, Oregon's Dylan Gabriel. They're all hanging out with Eli and Peyton. So there's been a few signings as well. All-American Keoti Armstrong, he's committed to Texas A&M. Quincy Porter, he's pledged his career to Ohio State. Ohio State's Caleb Downs, he's playing both sides of the ball at the moment. He's doing some work at safety and he's doing some work at running back after his transfer from Alabama. So he's those two-way play. The more two-way players you've got on your roster, they're more useful than they can be. And one of note that I know that you want to touch on as well, Fletch, is Brady Hart committing to Michigan rather than Ohio State.
Yes.
Seeing as you're the Michigan boy. And the only other one that was on my radar is the fact that Les Miles is suing the LSU, suing the NCAA and the College Football Hall of Fame over some victories that have been taken away from him, and he's not very happy about it, as you can imagine.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say first off with Brady Hart, and I'll get that out the way now. Number one, is that the most Michigan name ever for a quarterback? It's like written in the stars for a Brady Hart to be a Michigan quarterback. I think that just... But also, one of the things I was thinking is I read the tweets that have come out since his committal to Michigan. In the day he visited Michigan in the week, and then a couple of days later visited Ohio State, walked out of the Ohio State campus, was still in the area as he FaceTimed JJ McCarthy and committed to Michigan. Now, as a Michigan boy who cannot stand Ohio State, the fact that Brady Hart committed to Michigan in Ohio, in the area of Ohio State, just for me feels a little bit sweet. I'm not going to lie. I had to get that out there. But what do you guys think about Caleb Downs playing both sides of the ball at Ohio State?
Go on, Joe.
Yeah, I mean, you got to be really athletic to do that on a consistent basis. I mean, look at guys like Travis Hunter. I mean, anytime you really want to try to free yourself up to be that kind of athlete, like it's going to take a lot. And, typically very few guys can do it very well. So, we'll see. It certainly happens. It would not be the first time that we've seen someone in the Big Ten, especially, excel at playing offense and defense. But, I think it's a good move for the most part. It's just a matter of staying healthy, right? I think that's the biggest concern any coach has when you have a guy playing both ways like that.
I think running back and safety is very different from sort of wide receiver and cornerback because I think if you can take those wide receiver characteristics of being able to leap that high and think, yes, you can transition it to the corner. If you can get your head around the defense and where you actually need to be as a defender rather than as an attacker, yes, wide receiver and cornerback is probably the opportunistic way to play both sides of the ball. But safety and running back, the running back's the way you're going to pick up your injuries. So, what's the point in having a man who's playing safety as well if he's always injured because he's just been run over by 10 people? So, like Joe said, I think the key will be to staying healthy. If he can stay healthy when he's on the offensive side of the ball, then maybe, he does prove useful on the defense.
Yeah. Do you think that, I know it's always mentioned that the linebacker is the quarterback of the defense, but one of the really good things about being a running back and lining up where you do is that one of the advantages is being able to read and see more of the defense than, say, an offensive lineman can or a wide receiver can over there, far on the left or far on the right. Do you think that helps him in his move to safety, in the ability, having that ability to read defenses a pre-snap would help him on the other side of the ball in transitioning into safety?
Well, he played more safety at Alabama, though, didn't he? And now he's kind of, or at least he did a little bit. But I think it's a good point that you make, Fletch. Like, a lot of guys would argue that depending on how your defense utilizes the safety, that's more similar to what a quarterback does than a middle linebacker sometimes. Is it different from defense to defense? Absolutely. But for the same reason that you said, the running back can see more of the defense and can kind of make his reads, and based on that, or at least can make informed decisions about where he's going to go, where he needs to cut and bounce out. The safety kind of has the same sort of perspective on the opposing offense. And because you are literally the last line of defense, you need to know everyone else's responsibility. So that takes a tremendous level of IQ to play safety at the highest level.
Yeah. You are right as well. I did get them the wrong way around. He was a safety, or played safety predominantly. Sorry. And
no worries.
Is there anything as well in that you wanted to touch on? I think the suings are quite important in the scheme of things at the moment, but is there anything else before that you wanted to touch on?
Oh, the suings.
Out of the news. Yeah, we'll go on to that.
Yeah.
So I've got to ask you, Joe, I'm going to throw this one straight to you. This is a tumultuous time already for the NCAA, who've just had to come out of a massive settlement already after a major lawsuit. How much of this pressure do you think the NCAA can take at the moment with yet another lawsuit heading their way?
It's a tough spot for them to be in for sure. I think Charlie Baker is already getting more than he signed up for, which, if you want to, you came from politics, you knew this was going to happen. But at the same time, really the people who are going to be most affected are kind of the schools who don't have as deep of pockets, right? Schools like the Ohio States, the Michigans, the Florida States of the world, they're going to be hit for sure, but they're going to be fine in the long run. It's the smaller schools like the G5s, the FCS level schools who have to magically come up with, a number that, 10 years ago would have been right around their entire operating budget. Now have to come up with it to do all this backpay, right? So that's the toughest part for sure. The NCAA as an organization, I think the key really is just I hope they're bringing in some younger level executives who are ready to adapt with the way that the landscape has continued to change and will continue to change. I think the big issue for a long time was having Mark Emmert at the helm and someone who was, not to sound ageist, but was older than I think a lot older than obviously the athletes on the field, and just was close to retirement age anyway, and just didn't want to deal with it. But now you bring in someone who's got a lot of experience, but also has a lot more runway ahead of them professionally, who cares. I think that's the biggest thing the NCAA has going for it right now, is just bringing in people who have that experience and have the desire to actually make it better than it was.
Absolutely. I could not agree with you more there. Nick, what do you think about Les Miles and suing the NCAA?
I think it's one of the. I think let's be fair. It's from a personal point of view. His sort of Hall of Fame qualification is affected, because that's part and parcel of what he said in his lawsuit. That, you know, by having victories taken away from him, it makes it harder for him to become a Hall of Fame coach. And, you know, if you've worked all your life and you're getting older, and, you know, you're aiming to make that Hall of Fame and put your name down in history, for someone to turn around and say, well, we're going to take these away from you. Yeah, you probably are a bit narked about it. But, you know, I think ultimately, if they've been taken away and it's right to take them away, then he hasn't really got a leg to stand on. But, you know, if they haven't consulted him and, you know, it's being done harshly, then I think he's got every right to turn around and kick and scream and want his victories back. So, yeah. You know, but it's a, you know, I hate to slam America while Joe's here, but, you know, it's a suing culture. If you're not happy about something, just sue somebody. That's the way it rolls.
Pretty much, you know. I mean, let's be clear. That's how you solve problems if you already have money. You know what I mean? But yeah, rich people in America, very loose with the S word, for sure.
Yeah, I've got to say, I worked in a trampoline park for a year, and it's not too dissimilar over here when you actually think about it. There's a lot of people very, very quick to pull the injury lawyers for you adverts out and the phone numbers that they kept off those adverts.
I love that you guys have those guys too, by the way. That's a huge thing. Personal injury I love that. It's a big thing in America anywhere you go. But that has me chuffed when I watch British TV and I see that's also a thing.
As we kind of wrap up the news there with Joe's perfect, you say that you were born in Manchester there with that lingo that you've just been dropping on us.
Right.
I'm going to throw at you our favourite weekly segment that Nick is absolutely thrilled with, and we're going to do our little trivia question of the week. Now, this week's is this week's I tried to find something that was a bit more I don't know the right word for it. I didn't necessarily want to go with this bit of trivia, but we'll go with it anyway. So these Joe normally come with. I'll normally ask the question, and then they come with about 2 or 3 other things that you could also guess at the same time as well if you want. But I'm going to lead with: can you tell me what the highest attended single game in NCAA football history was? Highest attended single game in NCAA football history.
Was it
its own special? Sorry, go on.
No, please continue.
I'm going to say it has its own special name. The game itself has its own special name. You know, one of those kind of single occasion names that ends up getting game. And if you can give me that name, the 2 teams that played, or even the year that it happened, any of those would be brilliant.
Was it one of the Iron Bowl games between Alabama and Auburn? No. Okay. Man, that's a tough one.
Was it in this century?
It was.
Right. Okay. Was it in this decade? No.
No.
Was it a postseason game?
Judging by the date, well, no, it wasn't.
No, it was not. Okay. Ooh.
Was it? It must have been over 100,000, surely.
Well, yeah.
Was it Virginia Tech and Tennessee?
It was.
Okay, when they played
It
at Bristol, the NASCAR track. Okay, I remember this game.
The
Yeah,
Battle of Bristol.
there we go.
Congratulations.
Only took me a few
So
minutes.
it was. Yeah,
You
it was
got it.
the Battle of Bristol
There
in
we go.
2016 on September the 10th. Just an extra point there if you can get. Can you remember what the score was? I say an extra
Oh,
point. You don't
man.
get points for this, but an extra point.
Yeah, I don't remember the score.
No.
No, I don't remember who won, to be honest with you.
The Tennessee Volunteers walked away with a victory, 45-25 over the Virginia Tech Hokies.
What
There you
was the
go.
attendance?
Yeah, that would be very helpful also in this
I was
part.
going to say,
wouldn't it, to tell
you
the
gave us the
attendance.
game. You haven't actually given us the attendance yet.
The reported attendance by the officials at the game was 150,990. However, the Guinness World Book of Records has it in around the 137,000 mark because obviously there are the stadium and the people involved with the game will obviously try and count people who may have snuck in. They will count people in media boxes, press boxes, coaching staff, and all those. So anyone who's in the stadium that they can count. Whereas obviously the Guinness World Book of Records only count attending, ticket holding, ticket scanned fans that were in the stands. So I reckon that would mean that it would be around 20,000 people were unaccounted for in terms of official tickets.
How do you get 20,000 people in that haven't got a ticket? That's like
Listen, you're East Tennessee. You're out there in the mountains. They just come out of the trees, man.
But also, when allowing 137,000 people in, there's got to be a point where you just kind of go, right, everyone just kind of show your ticket, hold your ticket up in the air, and we'll just let you through. And just crowd management will come in. And then, you know, with crowd management happening, some people can just naturally slip in through the cracks as well. So, with that in mind, by the way, well done, Joe. Thank you for, well done on cracking this week's trivia question.
I wouldn't have got it.
That means we can now go into the bread and butter of this episode. And realistically, we're going to start looking towards the 2024 season as we slowly but surely creep our way over to week 0, when the Georgia Tech will play Florida State in Dublin. And Joe, we want to just get your feelings on what you think is going to happen throughout the 2024 season. I will preface this with saying I'm aware it's like late June, so probably not the best time to be making true judgments. So if you're listening to this in 6 months' time, please remember this is the mid to late June that we're looking at this. But we'll look at the off season first. Have there been any transfer portal? What transfer portal moves have been catching your eye so far this off season?
The transfer portal guys, yeah, one that I'm really curious to see how he adjusts to his new surroundings is Malachi Nelson at Boise State. He came from USC, where he backed up Caleb Williams for a little bit there, and was actually the California High School Player of the Year 2 years ago in 2022. So he just played his true freshman season at USC, barely saw the field. And when you have someone who, you know, has had that many people tell them you're an amazing football player from the start, you want to go somewhere where you're going to start. So that's kind of why he found his way to the G5 level. But meanwhile, Boise State has a quarterback in Maddox Madsen who got a significant amount of starting time last year when Taylon Green was hurt and looked pretty solid. However, took an injury late in the year, and that's kept him out of spring practices. Haven't really seen him take the field since I think like early November. So they haven't actually named a starter yet, technically, in Boise, which is super interesting. If basically Malachi Nelson's the only one getting significant snaps, right? So I'm very curious to see how that goes down. But if he does actually kind of break the starting lineup there with Spencer Danielson's team, then I think he's set up pretty well, especially when you have, Ashton Genty to lean on a little bit in that offense. But Chris Mitchell at Notre Dame made some really good plays with the subpar team at Florida International last season. And now he comes to a team with a really favorable situation for receivers trying to make a name for themselves. And they have a new offensive staff with Mike Denbrock as the OC. So anything could happen there, but I like his size. I like what he's shown at other levels so far. Penny Boone, now at UCF, transferred twice this offseason, was the max leading rusher last season, transferred to Louisville in the spring. Apparently didn't like it very much, so he went back in the portal, and now he's with the Knights. I think he'll be a pretty good fit for Gus Malzahn's offense. Very big physical runner. Isaiah Bond is another one that's fairly self-explanatory. Really solid receiver, 13.9 yards per catch at Alabama last season. Now he's at Texas, and Quinn Ewers is comfortably in the starting quarterback job, so I think he'll fit in well there. And then the last one I got for you guys is Cameron Ward, quarterback at the Miami Hurricanes. Now came from Washington State, threw for 3,000 yards with the Cougars each of the last two seasons, but now going into an offense that's a little bit more of a pro-style offense. He's going to have to be a little bit more of a cog in the machine, as it were, whereas at Washington State, I don't know if you see how many times they throw the ball games, guys, but it gets up into the 70s sometimes. It's a very pass-heavy offense, and that they're not going to let that fly at me. So that's very curious to me.
Yeah.
Who do you think's put themselves in the best position? Because when you go into the transfer portal, obviously players are looking to move to get more game time or move because for educational reasons they want to go to a better school or what, they have their own personal reasons for why they want to move. But ultimately, if you see football as a career, you want to put yourself in a college where you've got to put yourself into a great position. Inside that transfer portal, who do you think's done that? Who do you think has made the best move?
Yeah. I think anytime you have a quarterback coming out of the portal and they get to a place where they can actually be, the star, I think that's great. Someone that stands out to me in that category is Will Howard, actually coming from Kansas State to Ohio State. Obviously Ohio State's offense is very reliant on the quarterback. And he more than proved himself at Kansas State. Ohio State's had phenomenal quarterbacks coaches the last 20 years, it feels like. So I think he put himself in a great position to, not just get better, but get some really nice tape together for the upcoming NFL draft and, just get himself ready for the next level. I think he was very smart about how he did that. I think his predecessor at Ohio State going to Syracuse was still a head scratcher, but, he found a great opportunity there.
Fair enough.
Are there any transfers that have happened this season that I guess took you by surprise a little bit?
Yeah, I think a lot of these usually end up taking me by surprise to some degree. I mentioned I mentioned the Penny Boone situation where he went from Toledo to Louisville, played the whole spring at Louisville, and then transferred to UCF. That was fairly interesting. And then there was the whole saga this offseason of Cormani McClain, who is a Florida kid from Lakeland, played his freshman season a little bit at Colorado under Deion Sanders, went into the portal, committed to Florida State, where he was originally going to play, and then decommitted from Florida State and is now going to play at Florida for the Gators. So just anytime, I feel like we had 3 or 4 different guys who kind of fit a similar mold of just committing and then decommitting and then committing and decommitting. Rashad Amos is another guy. I think he verbally committed to at least 2 different schools. He committed to both Mississippi and Mississippi State this offseason. I believe he's actually going to end up at Mississippi. There might have been a third school in there too. I can't remember off the top of my head, but I think now we're just at the point with the transfer portal where it is full blown free agency. I think there's positives to that. I think there's negatives to that. I think it's hell to keep up with doing this for a living, but it's interesting to see the guys who find the right fit right away and who have to try a little harder for whatever reason.
Yeah. Well, you got hundreds of schools that with rosters that take up 80 to 100 students. I would rather you than I trying to keep a track of a lot of that. That's a lot of work. A lot of work.
Yeah. Even just for 60. Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I think the NFL off season sometimes, and that's 32 teams with much smaller rosters, and even after you get to kind of towards the end of March, and you're a bit like, right, okay, can we take a minute, please, and just calm down? Are there any schools in particular that have taken you by surprise? I think Miami for me, I was quite shocked. Well, not shocked, but I felt that Miami have had a really good transfer portal and off season. Ohio State seem to do a lot better, or at least as a Michigan fan, I just get this nasty feeling that Ohio State have done quite well, and there are a couple of schools that for me have had just kind of, I guess, standout transfer portals and whatnot. Are there any for you that are particularly done quite well? Sorry, I don't know why English left my brain then.
No worries, you're doing fine. I think the one that was, I think it's great on their part. I'm a little surprised it worked out this well for them was Texas, especially on the offensive side of the ball. I mean, they've got receivers from all walks of life beating down the door to play for Steve Sarkisian, which I guess kind of makes sense when you look at his track record in terms of the guys that he developed at the University of Alabama when he was there. And then even going back to when he was the head coach at Washington and then USC for a little bit there. I mean, but just looking at the guys that they brought in on the offensive side, I mean, I mentioned Isaiah Bond. I feel like there's like 4 to 5 other ones that I feel like could be a starter pretty much anywhere in the FBS and are going to be fighting for airtime, so to speak, with the Longhorns, which I think is super interesting. Oregon did pretty well. Colorado was super up and down. And then Ole Miss, I think, is the other one. I think when I look at their transfer portal haul this year, I thought they did really well.
Yeah. What about you, Nick? There have been a couple of, we spoke about this 2-3 weeks ago, but looking now, are there any schools that are still taking your fancy as ones who've had a particularly good transfer portal?
I'll be honest. The most interesting thing I'm looking to see is how Kalen DeBoer takes over from Nick Saban, because I mean that's not exactly an easy man to follow. Gerard Mayo taking over from Bill Belichick. The fact that Bill Belichick has pissed the bed for the last 2 years probably makes it a bit easier to do. But you've got two head coaches there, just for example, who are absolute legends of the game, no doubt. And at college level, Nick Saban is undeniably the man. And to stand there and go, yeah, I'm going to take that job. Yeah, I'm really looking forward to. I mean, it's not like Alabama have a bad side, is it? So it's not like he's up against it with a poor quality team. But nevertheless, what's the saying? Don't be the man to replace the man. Be the man to replace the man who replaces the man. And that's it. He's put his neck on the line, and Kalen DeBoer's taken this job. I'm actually quite interested to see how he goes on, just following the shadow.
Yeah. So to put that in Premier League terms, don't be David Moyes, be Louis van Gaal.
Something like that, yeah. But that was a nasty job. Who would want to be any of them going there? Let's be honest.
Exactly. But that's just taking over from one of the greatest to ever do it. It's just a bad idea. You are almost 100% of the time going in to be a scapegoat.
You're on hiding to nothing.
Yeah. Which obviously I hope doesn't happen to Kalen DeBoer at all. But it's unfortunately history is not on his side with that one.
No, but I think the saying is the best job in the world is a fired college football coach, because even if you fail, these buyouts will take care of you for a decade. So I don't think he's too stressed about it. Obviously, he wants to win, but the parachute that you get from a job like that is phenomenal. So
Yeah. Well, I know this is really off topic, but I don't know if either of you follow much of the NBA. I'm stuck with Detroit and Michigan, unfortunately. It's the sin, the crosses I have to bear. Who just fired their head coach after 1 year, Monty Williams, who's getting $65 million now in just to carry on. He's also receiving $20 million off the Suns to not coach. The man's being paid $85 million to not coach somebody. And suckers like us have not been coaching NBA teams our whole lives for free, and he's getting paid $85 million to do it. I think that's just unfair.
Have not been paid that much to not do something. Yes.
So we'll move on just a little to as well. You are the managing editor for writing about the Group of Five, and I did ask you beforehand, do you want to cover the Group of Five? And you were like, well, yes, I would love to cover the Group of Five, which is what we are going to now do. We'll start looking at, I guess, some of the very early predictions going into it, and we'll start off with the Group of Five relatively quickly. So, for those of you who are still learning, still not quite sure who the Group of Five are, that would be the American Athletic Conference, Conference USA, the MAC, the Mid American Conference. You've got the Mountain West and the Sun Belt Conference. We're going to go in alphabetical order because that's the way I've got it listed on my screen. We will go with the American Athletic Conference. Are there any particular teams standing out in the AAC? Who do you think, conference champion more likely? Is there anything to particularly watch out for in the AAC?
Yes. I think Memphis is kind of the front runner, in my opinion, for the conference championship there. Seth Hennigan is entering his fourth year as the starter, I believe, fourth or fifth. The amount of experience that he's gotten is it's great, and he's really shined with the amount of pressure that comes with being the starting quarterback at a school like Memphis. Ryan Silverfield, he's gotten his team a little bit better each year, but just hasn't quite cracked winning the AAC title this year. If they do, I would imagine him being a very attractive candidate for any Power 5 jobs that come open at the end of the season for sure. And I mean, just Memphis in general, I think they're one of the schools that is adjusting to the new world of college football extremely well. They have this partnership with FedEx that's funding their NIL for, I believe it's like $25 million over 5 years, something like that. I'd have to look up the exact number there, but Memphis is very much throwing their hat into the ring to be the top G5 team now that the Group of Five is guaranteed at least one playoff spot in the new playoff system now that it's expanding to 12 teams. Other ones in the AAC, I think Tulane is not going to drop off very much despite losing Willie Fritz to Houston. They have an Oregon transfer quarterback in Ty Thompson, who I think is super promising. They still have Mekhi Hughes at running back. And with that, I'm pretty sold on the Green Wave's chances to get right back in there. So I think those are the two teams that you really need to watch out for in the AAC. But anytime you really start to count out UTSA, they start making a run too. So,
as is usually the case, there are a few teams around the college football landscape that I'm aware that you stop looking at them, and all of a sudden, they make you regret not looking at them.
Exactly.
Conference USA is, again, same question, but Conference USA.
Yeah, it's hard to imagine Liberty not winning it this year again. They won the league last year. They had the number one rushing offense in all of FBS in terms of yards per game and yards per carry, I believe. I think Western Kentucky might give them a run for it as well a little bit now that they have a new quarterback, now that they've got some more talented transfers coming in. But really, the thing with Liberty, their schedule is one of the most favorable in college football. Really, they don't play a Power 5 opponent. They have a few non-conference G5 games. They play an FCS opponent, and then they jump into a Conference USA that, at the top, has one or two teams that are pretty competitive, and the rest not so much. So,
yeah,
I think for that reason, they're another one of those teams that's going to contend really heavily for the playoff spot. But they have the added stipulation of you got to go undefeated, because if you don't and you lose, if you drop a game to one of these teams that you should really beat, the committee is not going to look favorably on you at all. So,
yeah, and that was actually before. I guess we'll jump on to the Mid-Atlantic Conference in a second. That's something that's really interesting to point out, because Gary, who is normally joins us most weeks, he's a Florida State fan, and that is, I think, to many of us, particularly across the pond, just such an odd concept, and I think in many ways just goes against what we kind of know. In the they go 13-0 and don't make the playoffs is such an odd, and how they work that your strength of schedule over record does matter, but who you play also matters just as much. And it's just an interesting concept to us, I think.
Yeah, it's an inexact science, which I think is our favorite kind of science in the U.S. But I think, some of those ones, they put certain people on the committee put more importance on some factors than others, and then somewhere they have to meet in the middle. It's a very weird system we have. I completely agree with you. It's fun, but it's weird for sure.
Oh yeah, playoffs by committee is a fantastic. And could you imagine, Nick, just doing the Champions League like that? Champions League by committee. Do you know what? We like what Villa did this year. Villa can just get in anyway. Anyway, moving on to the Mid-Atlantic. Again, same question. These are all the same question, just the new conference. So MAC.
Yeah, in the MAC. Love me some MAC football. Toledo, I think, is my front runner to win that league again. Well, not again. They won it in 2022, made the championship game in 2023, lost to the Miami, Ohio Redhawks, which, geography lesson, there's a Miami and Ohio for people that don't know. It's not as fun. Anyway.
Yes.
But Toledo's a good team. I like Jason Candle in terms of what he's able to develop on both sides of the ball, really. They still have Jaquez Stewart, who's a really strong running back. Not the same kind of guy as Penny Boone. They were a really solid 1-2 punch last year, but Jaquez has a little more acceleration to him. So I think he'll be fun to watch as well. And their defense is going to keep getting better with some of the coaching additions they've made in the offseason for sure. But Miami, Ohio, I think will be solid as well. They return a few interesting players, but they did get gutted pretty badly. So I think that's going to be a big obstacle to overcome. And, their starting quarterback is a guy who I don't think he's been fully healthy since 2019, really. And he had a pretty nasty leg break in the middle of the game last season that he's still trying to, come back from. So that's tough to overcome. For that reason, I think Toledo has the clearest path, but we'll see.
A quick question on Toledo as well. They obviously Quinion Mitchell went very early in the draft this year, which was a huge thing for a school like Toledo. How do you think things like that help with them going forward in terms of, things like recruitment and just generally around the facility? As relatively new people to college football, having such an early first round draft pick as a group of 5 school, a player's coming out of high school looking at Toledo and going, okay, so there are opportunities there to put my name on the map, so that would that then give them a leg up in terms of, against other Group of 5 schools in terms of recruiting and things like that? Do you think?
I think it already is. If you look at 247 Sports rankings, which is one of the main recruiting media outlets here, they have Toledo as the highest rated recruiting class for 2025 in the Group of 5, actually. And I believe they are number 61 in the nation, if I'm remembering correctly from when I looked at it this morning. Yeah, I think it already is. Anytime you get a guy like that to come through your program, and not just come through your program, but really have the opportunity to go to bigger schools and have that game film against more ACC and Big Ten opponents, and wanted to stay with the school that took a chance on him and really developed him to get to this point. You don't see that super often, but anytime you have a guy, no matter how long he spent at your program, become that high of a draft pick, it's tremendous in terms of helping recruiting, in terms of your overall morale. For coaches, selfishly, I'm sure they're happy to have a guy like that on their resume for sure. So yeah, it helps the overall profile of your program, tremendously. If you can, kind of stack a couple more guys like that on top of each other, then you're well on your way. Yeah.
That's brilliant. Nick, have you, by the way, at this point, got anything to add? I feel like I'm skipping over you a lot at the moment.
No, it's all right. I'm quite. Look, the man's talking. The man knows what he's on about. No, I mean, I think had it not been for Joe Alt in the draft, fighting Irish, by the way, had that man not been in the draft, Toledo could have probably had the best tackle in the available. So if the performances of the college ultimately are what defines them and obviously helps recruit, but yes, you're right, those players that perform well, get drafted well, it sends the message that if you come to our school and you perform well, then you can get drafted. So it can do nothing but help. And, like Joe said, it's obviously already having an effect. So, they're in that winning position. They just got to keep going.
Yeah. And I've just been looking on to 247 Sports just to double check. I think Toledo are around the 61 to 64 mark, but obviously, I think if you check this morning, and there's been a few more of the commits and things like that have happened in the meantime, then just changed slightly. But yeah, they are in and around that area, and so I think it's. I don't know, for someone like myself, I just think it's lovely to see a Group of 5 school get such a boost and really put themselves in front of the world and showcase themselves in such a great light with a young man such as Quinion Mitchell.
I love stories like that. That's at G5 Football Daily. That's the kind of stories we chase. So yeah, love that.
Yeah,
shameless plug for sure. Anyway,
I'll take all the shameless plugs that you would like. Mountain West. What are you in the Mountain West for the upcoming season?
Yeah, Boise State, I think, are still my guys there in terms of who I think are going to be the main contenders. They won the league last year, but really kind of had to figure it out towards the end. Fired Andy Avalos about 7 games in, replaced him with Spencer Danielson. South Florida is the number 1 G5 recruiting class on 247 right now. I apologize for that. But anyway, yeah, Spencer Danielson comes in. I think it's going to be interesting to see how he gets the offensive figured out, given he has much more of a defensive background. But they still have Ashton Genty, who I believe is one of the better running back prospects in the 2025 draft class. I think he is going to add a lot to their attack. Absolutely. I'm trying to think if there's anybody else in the Mountain West who I don't immediately think of like red flags in terms of their chances for a conference title this year. UNLV, they made it to the championship game last year, got super hot right away, and then just sort of fell off the wagon. They lost their starting quarterback, so that's going to be tough to rebound from. overall, I just think, Boise State has themselves set up the best, but at the end of the day, they're going to have to execute. I think they have a tougher schedule, which is going to be harder to contend with too. But that's also the reason why I respect Boise State as a program. They go chase those fun non-conference matchups on the East Coast. I think they're opening up at Georgia Southern this year, which will be fun. But yeah.
If I could just jump in there.
Go for it.
Wyoming. Obviously, the biggest name out of Wyoming is Josh Allen, Buffalo. But how does a school like Wyoming pick up? They have that beacon, they have that star, that Josh Allen, if you like. But no other players go into Wyoming have come out as big as that in a long time. So how does a school like Wyoming, for example, get themselves on the map with someone like Josh Allen, but then not produce the next one after that? How do they improve?
Well, I think Josh Allen's just incredibly gifted, both physically and in terms of his talent. I mean, it's not often you see a quarterback that tall who literally could just fall forward and get 4 yards with how big he is. It's incredible.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think, Wyoming's recruiting strategy has always relied very heavily on California and Texas. Obviously, with a low population just in general in Wyoming, it's hard to really, build a group of all homegrown kids. Not to say that there are not really good football players in Wyoming. I think Frank Crum in this draft class is a prime example of that. Although I don't believe he got drafted, but he did sign with Denver. But he was phenomenal each of the last 2 years. So it really depends on the kind of recruiting staff that you come in. Some of these guys really rely heavily on their junior college connections, which is where Josh Allen came from. Some of them have just built strong ties with, some of the power pipeline states, as it were. And then sometimes you just get lucky and find a kid right in your backyard. So, but with Wyoming specifically, those are the two areas that you see the majority of their, important players come out of, with California being the majority of where these guys typically play their prep ball and junior college ball and that sort of thing.
Fair enough.
Josh Allen. Josh Allen was the one who was, he was like a 0-star, 0 offer recruit that nobody wanted, and he just kept peppering, or just kept on top of as many coaches as he could, writing as many letters and emails and whatnot as he could. And I think, not to be disrespectful to Wyoming here, but you just kind of get lucky that nobody else has picked this kid up, and you get to give him the opportunity, which is helpful. And finally, the Sun Belt Conference, as we move on.
Yeah. So there are 2 teams in the Sun Belt, actually, I think could really vie for the conference championship this year. The first is Appalachian State. Sean Clark every single year just puts together these very consistent teams. I think they're the most disciplined on the line of scrimmage, if that makes sense, since he's a former offensive line guy, very well respected in that area. And that paves the way for these, these running backs that would be average elsewhere, look like superstars. However, they also have the added benefit of another guy who came from the California junior college ranks in Joey Aguilar, who kind of came alive last season and figured it out as he went, really. And by the end of the season, I think he was one of the better starting quarterbacks in the group of 5 for sure. And the other one is Texas State. G.J. Kinney came into that job last year. Texas State had not been good at the Division I level ever for their first 15 to 20 years. And then Kinney comes in and just completely breathes new life into the whole operation. They did lose some guys, but they also retained a lot of really key guys, namely people like wide receiver Joey Hobart, who was extremely good in the early part of last season for sure. He had that highlight kind of like one-handed sideline catch against Baylor and their huge win in Waco there. They also have Ismail Mahdi coming back as a really solid running back. And then they just brought in Jordan McLeod from the transfer portal, a quarterback as well, who he sort of fell into their lap. They got extremely lucky that he was still there when they did, because they sort of spurned last year's starting quarterback in TJ Finley. He's now at Western Kentucky. They brought in Jaden DeLora from Arizona. He gets in some legal trouble, so he's no longer with the team. And then Jordan McLeod just happened to be there, uncommitted. So they got extremely lucky, and I think he's gonna put up a lot more yards in his final season of college football there as well.
And that wraps us up with, I believe that's 5. That's the 5 I've got in my list. So, out of the group of 5, is there anything that in particular, I guess, is weighing on your mind, particularly with this group of 5 heading into 2024, or something that, with each of the 5 conference champions getting a spot in the playoffs, I guess, again, way too early to ask, potentially, but are there any that you can see causing an upset in the playoffs, particularly against some of the Power 4 now conferences that they would go up against?
It would really depend on the matchup, right? I mean, unfortunately, I think they're going to get stuck with the 1 seed the way that maybe not the 1 seed. No, they're not going to get stuck with the 1 seed, actually, because the top 4 seeds get a first round bye, which would mean I believe they would play the top remaining seed, which would be the 5 seed. Even so, still going to be a tough one to get through there. Right now, there's not really anything jumping out at me about any of the main G5 playoff contenders that really, scream to me they can make it a real shot at getting to the second round of the playoffs. But I could always be proven wrong. And all it takes is just one bad day from an opposing defense, or just one formation that they can't figure out. And then all of a sudden you're down, 10 points and not really knowing how to respond. So I think it's going to be an extraordinary circumstance if they do make it to the second round of the playoff. I'll say that. But specifically, there's nothing really jumping out at me that says this is going to give all the Power 5 teams problems. I think most of them are pretty easy to figure out, because they all have kind of one major strength, and then everything else is okay, so to speak.
Yeah.
But,
yeah. Lovely. So, and then we'll get onto the boring bit that no one cares about. We'll get onto the Power 4 because we can. It's fine. No one cares about this bit. So, well, before we do, Nick, would you like to add anything on top of the group of 5?
No, I'm just sat in awe listening to a master. No, I mean, apart from going over and repeating things, I don't think any of the the G5 playoff teams, whoever it may be that comes out as top winners, I don't think they've got the power. They haven't got the ability to fight hard. And, like you say, yes, if another team has an off day, so be it. But, if both teams are on the game, I think they're, I can't see an upset either way.
Well, I am all over the Akron Zips to the college football playoff final. So
what casino is even offering that?
I have no idea, but for some reason in my head, the last few weeks, the name Akron Zips has just stuck with me. And when I pre-ordered College Football 25, I was like, that's who I'm now building my dynasty with. So I don't know. It's just a thing in my head at the moment with the Akron Zips. So
there you go.
Getting on to I feel really bad because Gary's not here. So we will start with the ACC so we can move on without getting too much into it. In my opinion, I'm going to ask this while kind of thinking out loud myself. Is it Miami's to lose at the moment?
Miami are going to make a really good run at it. It would not surprise me if they won it. I think Florida State are also a contender. Just, again, similar to Miami, brought in some really good transfer portal kids. They're able to hang on to some of the really solid players that were, role players from last season and the snub there. They did lose a little bit in that defensive front seven. I think that's the biggest concern for Florida State. Losing somebody like Jared Verse, for example, who just blew me away at the combine. that's going to be tough to replace. But yeah, I think the main contenders for the ACC crown are in Florida this year with Florida State and Miami. Yeah, I don't think there's really anyone else on the ACC that really strikes my fancy as a contender. I'd like to think Louisville is in there, but after the spring they've had, I don't know. I mean, it seems like they're just trying to figure things out, really. But we'll see.
Do you think this year's, the current, we'll call it situation in the ACC at the moment, do you think that spills into anything during the season, or is it one of those where as the first ball gets kicked off in the ACC, which by the way officially is in week 0, as both the Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets of the ACC play the Florida State Seminoles of the ACC in Dublin, is it once that first ball is kicked, all that matters now is football for all of us?
For a lot of the people at home, for sure. I think a lot of people kind of compartmentalize that kind of stuff. And then we'll get to probably the midway point of the season, and then that kind of stuff will start popping up again. I mean, it's not going away for sure. So, I think people are just going to continue to the people that want to get money out of the ACC and break up the ACC and that sort of thing are going to keep pushing. The cynic, that's the word, in me thinks that someone on that side would definitely take advantage of the fact that people are going to be, overwhelmed by the challenges that come with just making sure a season goes off without a hitch to, continue the case and try to catch them off guard because they don't have the time or manpower to devote to it. So I can see that happening. It's not going away, but I think for the first few weeks of the season, I think we'll all get to hopefully enjoy some uninterrupted college football, but we'll see.
Who do you think, Nick, for the ACC?
I'm gonna go with Clemson. Just because I think, I just want to pick somebody different. Simple as. I'm just going to pick somebody different. So I'll go with Clemson. Ultimately, it doesn't matter because while Gary's not here, I can say it as loud and proud. Notre Dame are gonna be the top dogs of of college football. And they're gonna win everything this year. So it doesn't matter. So anybody.
I mean, I'd love to bang my NC State drum. As everyone found out in week 1, I have my little soft spot for NC State. Not NC State, sorry, UNC. I have my little soft spot for UNC, but unfortunately, I just can't see it.
Neither can I.
However, no.
So I actually dream though.
Yeah, but it's one of those. I wish all of my friends at UNC all the very best for the upcoming season. Move on to the Big 12. And I don't open like this, but I'm going to open like this. Does Deion Sanders do it? Does he do it?
No, not this year anyway. No, I mean, I think Travis Hunter will certainly have his moments, as will Shedeur Sanders. Shedeur is immensely talented, and I think he's going to have some, highlight reel moments that will ultimately push him into a pretty good playoff spot. If not, then that would very much surprise me. But what I have seen from him, the talent is hard to deny. The team as a whole, I have a lot of questions about, especially when you have a lot of things floating out there about, his leadership style and that sort of thing. And part of me was very enthused to see him succeed, I should say, in coaching. And I don't think one bad season makes you bad at it by any means, but I think there's kind of this weird line where he's walking, where he's being about player empowerment, but also there's all these stories about how players don't like the way he treats them. So it's one of those things where I'm not there. I'm not boots on the ground. I don't know, but just curious to see how he kind of rebounds there. And, ultimately, if you win a lot of games, no one really cares about that sort of thing. Yeah. To answer your original question about Big 12 contenders, Kansas State, I think, are the top dog for me. Utah's a very close second, though. I like a lot of the stuff that Utah's bringing back. Kyle Whittingham's an amazing coach. Same with Kansas State. I mean, just tons of returning talent. I mean, you do lose Will Howard, which is tough, but I think they were able to go in and bring in some more people to really fill the holes that they needed to. So.
Lovely. And I'm sorry, I don't want to go back and backtrack on it. And this is not a Colorado podcast. We don't want to bang the drum too hard about Deion Sanders, as everybody's doing it already. But I have to ask, because the point you just made, was it a bad season in terms of being a bad season, or was it a bad season in terms of everyone just seemed to expect more from Deion Sanders? Because I know Colorado the year before were even worse. So he did make improvements to the general, in general, and strides forward with that Colorado. And with the college landscape the way it is, could you consider that to be at least a relatively successful season, given the progression made with the original roster?
It's a fair question. I think, to your point, they were better than they were, for sure. However, the problem is how high the expectations are being set, both by people within the program and in the American media anyway. People are just expecting him to come in and, just be immensely successful right away, the way that he was at Jackson State in the SWAC. And it's a completely different type of school. It's a completely different type of player base. So you can't expect the same results, in my opinion. I think anyone who expects, a coach to come in right away and, tie a lasso around the moon is kidding themselves, really. It's going to take a couple of years to really establish like a program culture and that sort of thing. Do coaches come in and have success in their first year? Sometimes, for sure. But also, I think it's far more reasonable to think that they're going to need a little bit of time to figure things out. But, to my original point, I think because they didn't live up to the, national championship contender expectations that were placed upon them or whatever, they need to at least make a bowl game this year, I'll say.
I mean, I think
Absolutely.
Go on.
No, I'm sorry. I was simply just agreed.
I was just going to say, I think my issue with Colorado is not necessarily with Deion, but with Shador himself. He's the early front runner to be the number one pick. That man is not worthy of a number one pick. He's nowhere near the quality of a number one pick. I think had he been picked in this draft just gone with the Caleb Williams and all that, he probably would have second round at best, if not third or fourth round. The man's not a first round pick, and yet he is the betting favorite to be. I mean, like you said at the beginning of the point, it's middle of June, so there's a long way to go yet. But the man's the betting favourite to be the number one pick, and he shouldn't be anywhere near it. The mind boggles sometimes.
I mean, with them odds, you just get people who don't think, who then go, "Oh, Shador Sanders." Vegas is just making a lot of free money by putting those odds low and getting people excited. I think the only people who benefit from that are BetMGM, Bet365, FanDuel, etc., etc.
Yeah.
To be honest, but
Exactly right. Yeah.
And let's go on to the best conference of them all. One that we all know just how much we love them on this podcast. Who wins the Pac-12?
Oh man, I got to pick one of two teams then, huh? I think Oregon State's in a better place. I like Ben Goldbramson. They got to find a solution in the running back room. I think they will. It's just a matter of now that they are, not in the Pac-12 as it were, and lose some recruiting power as a result. What's going to be really interesting to watch with both Oregon State and Washington State is how do they recruit offensive and defensive line, because that's the difference maker between teams like in the Big Ten and the SEC is can you get, dudes that are big enough, strong enough, and can figure, play the game well enough to compete at the absolute highest level. I mean, you go back to Steve Sarkisian's first year at Texas, and he gutted the entire offensive line room right away because, he was like, if we get bigger bodies in here, that's what's going to help propel us to national relevance, and it worked. So that's what's going to be interesting to me. I think with the Pac-12, I think Oregon State's the better team right now of the two that remain. So,
yes. Well, you 50-50 shot at them all. I know it doesn't. That's not exactly how it works, but that's. I mean, you can turn off now because the last two conferences just don't matter nearly as much as the Pac-12. However, we will move on to the Big Ten. What's your thoughts on the Big Ten this year? Thoughts on the Big Ten this year?
Yeah, you're not going to like it, but I like Ohio State a lot this year, for sure. I think some of the guys that they've brought in, I think Ryan Day knows this is kind of a put up or shut up year in terms of just getting more, getting better results, getting the Big Ten title game, possibly winning the Big Ten. If he wins the Big Ten, I think that's good enough to, maybe silence some of the people who are curious as to whether or not he's the guy moving forward. I think they'll make the playoff as well. Which I mean, I guess if they win the Big Ten, they would. But I think they are the best team. I think they did the best job with the transfer portal so far in the Big Ten. So yeah, that's my opinion of Ohio State in the Big Ten this year.
Sadly, I think you're right. How about you, Nick? Do you think would you tend to agree, or are you like me thinking Minnesota are going to do it?
No, I think I'll put my pound on Ohio State. I think play the odds, but in a conference like that, it's win or bust, isn't it? You have to turn up every week and you have to win all your games because it's you don't get a second chance up there, so it's just get it done.
So that's fine as long as the current 3-year streak continues. I'm fine with that. So they can go 11-1. The rest is irrelevant. Which I don't know if you've seen. Probably haven't seen this. I'm not sad with it now. I followed an account on Twitter that it's an automated bot account that every day tweets. It has been 1,600 in such and such days since Ohio State last beat Michigan. That's sad, and I retweet it every day. It's beautiful. It reminds me of potential.
As someone who sees your tweets, nice, I'd rather you not.
Tough luck. Mute me. So, finally, we'll look over to the SEC, which is arguably, but not very arguably, the best conference in the country in terms of talent. Georgia. Georgia?
Sure, yeah. I can see Georgia. I think Texas is going to give everybody a run for their money. I think Texas are between the two newcomers with Texas and Oklahoma. Yeah. Texas is by far more ready for the move. Based on what we saw from them getting to the college football playoff last year, I think they're going to be very competitive. It would not surprise me if the SEC championship was Georgia and Texas. Georgia's a very safe bet, but because I am just A, impressed by what they did last year, and B, I feel like I gotta pick somebody that's not the kind of the consensus. I'm gonna go Texas on SEC championship pick.
So forgive me if I'm wrong, but I've heard of recently a famed term, well, apparently a famed term, like the trifecta, in returning head coach, returning offensive coordinator, returning quarterback, which for college football is just a fantastic position to be in, and Georgia are in that position, aren't
They are. I believe Texas is as well.
Yeah.
Because Quinn Ewers is back, Steve Sarkisian's back. Kyle Flood was their OC last year. Yeah, so Texas is both those schools are in that position. So yeah, to your point, if you're in that club, then it's a pretty good club to be in.
Yeah. So that's all conferences done. So to those of you who have stuck around for the Big Ten and SEC and didn't shut off after the world-class Pac-12, thank you so much for sticking around with us, and we got a little bit more for you. I'm wary of time and the fact that we are taking all of your Friday evening here, Joe, as I'm sure you've got so many other things that you could be doing instead. So we'll try and keep it brief this last bit. Not necessarily looking at Heisman winners, but if you want to throw, a couple of Heisman, but who should we be looking for throughout the 2024 season?
Ashton Jeanty, for sure, at Boise State. Hopefully this reference wins me some sort of credibility in the UK. It reminds me a lot of J.J., actually, in terms of style and frame. Rushed for over 1,300 yards last year, had almost 2,000 receiving yards as well. So very much the kind of guy you want on an NFL roster in terms of guys who can do both. So I think he's going to get a lot of buzz if he stays healthy. He missed a little bit of time last year, so those lower extremities got to keep those healthy. But he's a fantastic athlete. Caden Salter, I talked about him a little bit with Liberty, their starting quarterback, extremely mobile. Hard to think of a better running quarterback in college football right now. His stats this year are going to be insane because of the lower quality of schedule that Liberty has compared to pretty much everybody else. And for that reason, I think he will have quite a bit of room to improvise and break off some of those long running plays that you kind of saw him get away with last year. He's got some very good run blockers as well. I don't want to, say that there's no design quarterback runs in Jamie Chadwell's playbook. There absolutely is. So that further helps his cause. I mentioned Cameron Ward. I think he's a tremendous quarterback. I just think he's got to, find his groove in a new system. And Dylan Gabriel is another one who I think really needs a really good year if he wants any hope of, getting started at the next level at this point. Oregon's a great place to end your career if you're a college athlete looking to, run a good offense with Will Stein. That's the thing why I think I have a little bit of hope for Gabriel as well. Will Stein is a tremendous offensive coordinator and a pretty good quarterbacks coach as well. We've seen him do some really good things with Oregon, as well as at UTSA and at Louisville before that, if you go all the way back. So.
Lovely. And I think what you're looking at, some of the common ones would be also like your Quinn. You're looking at your next year's high draft picks, like your Quinn Ewers of the world, as well. Is there? I guess for those who are getting into college football this year, who have been into the NFL for a little while, will probably be aware that every year we would consider a draft to be insert position name here, heavy class. We have weak quarter classes, we have heavy wide receiver classes, and so on and so on. Is there a particular position group you would looking at to be quite heavy or quite top heavy in the upcoming 2025 draft? So again, position groups to look out for throughout the 2024 season as potential high draft picks next year.
That's a tough one. I think there's a lot of good defensive backs I'll say that. I think that's going to be another pretty heavy class there. I mean, Malachi Starks at Georgia, Travis Hunter, Benjamin Morrison at Notre Dame. I think that right at the top, I think those are some of the better prospects in this class. As far as actual, positions, I think that's my pick is defensive back. I think this is going to be one of those classes where there's a lot of really good defensive backs that are going to go easy. On the offensive side of the ball, there will be some good names, some good marquee names, but I don't think it's going to be a earth-shattering quarterback class the way that we've seen, a couple times in the last 10 years here. So,
no, and that's one thought I had again. The way Shador Sanders, even by some of the people I've considered to be more reasonable, Shador Sanders is quite high up on that list. And as Nick, you alluded to earlier, in many other drafts, referred to so high, you would not consider him such a high, so high up the quarterback list. So, from everything I see as well, it does feel like a slightly less quality quarterback class this year.
So
is there anyone you're particularly looking at, Nick?
Yeah, I was going to say, actually, two offensive linebackers, Harold Perkins and James Pierce Jr. Is it? I think, both are expected to go sort of mid, high to mid first round. Both put good stats up this last season. I think if they have what is to be expected seasons this year similar to last and continue to perform, then they should in theory have a decent draft position as well.
Lovely stuff. So if you are getting ready yourself now for the 2024 season and building up to week 0, I hope that this has been helpful especially in getting you started ready. Joe, I've got a couple of questions before we go. Question number 1 is, have you pre-ordered College Football 25 yourself, and are you looking forward to the game coming out? And question number 2 is, how can we find you going forward and get in touch? Because obviously all 6 of our listeners would love to.
Well, hello to the 6 of you. I'm very glad I could talk to you for a little bit. I haven't ordered EA 25. I haven't pre-ordered video games in a while. I usually just download the digital copies if there is a video game that I actually have time to play. So we'll see there. I am excited. This is the first year I can officially write it off on my taxes. So hooray! But you can find me G5footballdaily.com for the Group of 5 coverage. And also this week I launched verticals with Sports Illustrated dedicated to Oregon State and Washington State, the Pac-2. So those are my 2 big projects. I do a podcast. I have a radio show in Portland, Oregon. That's every Tuesday, where I interview sports figures from around the Pacific Northwest. I am entirely too busy, and I try to share as much of it as I can on Twitter at JOEHIO_. And that's where I am on pretty much every social handle, but I only really use Twitter. So there you go.
As a man that busy, we thank you very much for coming on this show. We were having a conversation. I'll let you in. We were having a conversation off screen the other week, and it was like, can we get some guests in? I was like, right, I'm going to try the one guy that I think I might have any sort of contact with, and that's only because I sort of helped him get in the game last year. But we'll see. I'll put it out there. So yeah, we really do appreciate you coming on. Thank you very much.
Thank you guys for having me, and then thank you for helping me get into Aviva, Nick. I was lost. I was lost in Dublin, and I hadn't even started drinking yet. So
I know I'd gone to the gate you needed to go to get your pass the day before, so that's how I knew where you needed to go. And as soon as you said, "I don't know where I go," right, go that way, that gate. So I'm glad I could help.
Excellent, thank you.
Lost in Dublin. That was one of the episodes of Always Sunny in Philadelphia, wasn't it? Or
Probably.
something similar.
Don't watch it.
But absolutely right. And just a quick one: when do you sleep? Is that a thing you do?
Pass. No, I not a lot. Yeah, I not a lot is the answer to that. I sleep when I can. I'm in Europe physically now, so I'm on the American sleep schedule, which is a whole thing. But I try to sleep in the very early hours of the morning is the answer.
Yeah, I love it. I basically live on a mix of GMT and Eastern time. I wake up GMT but go to bed Eastern time, and I used to love it when I'd be on Discord or whatever with my friends from Detroit and whatnot. My Detroit Lions fan friend, even they'd be going, "Wow, it's getting late. I need to go to bed." And I'm going, "You sure?" Well, good to go. I've got to be up in 2 hours. We've got loads of time. So, no, we really, truly appreciate it. It's been fun. It's been brilliant. And all of the links that Joe has mentioned in order to get in touch with him, to find his works, will be in the description, whether you're on YouTube or whether you are on audio only. All of those links will be in the description. And if you do follow us on social media, we will tag Joe in as well. And we do have more than 6 listeners, but it's usually when Gary's on, because all Florida State fans just somehow flock to us for a week when Gary's on, but then they don't bother when he's not. But as the world goes, apparently.
That's seminal search engine optimization. There you go.
It's been ever since we did the episode on kind of breaking down the basics of FSU and Clemson versus the ACC, and I think we hit SEO quite well on YouTube, and just as people were searching it, and got lucky, and then we were getting comments all day saying, "Whoa, there's an FSU fan in the UK. That's brilliant." And then me and Nick are sat there going, "Well, what? We exist too. Like, it's not just Gary." But no,
yeah.
Enjoy the rest of your Friday, gentlemen. And, well, whatever is left of it, it's not very much. And I will hopefully see you next week, Nick. And I will catch you around at some point, Joe.
Excellent. Thank you guys so much for your time.
Cheers.
Cheers.